Being a Rotarian is now even more rewarding. Rotary Global Rewards, our member benefit program, offers discounts you can use every day and helps Rotarians do what they do best: give back. The good you do comes back to you. Rotary Global Rewards. Find out more at rotary.org/myrotary.
Okay, let's get started. You know, I love that relationship and that chatter and the liveliness when we greet each other. That's what we're here for. That's what it's all about. It's about relationships and smiles and your fellow man. But, you know, going 4 tables away, Jan, is probably a little bit too far. 3, maybe. Okay, so let's get started. Our invocation this morning is by Past President Matt Davis. Song and Pledge is by Phil Armstrong, and visitor introductions is by Michael Willis. For invocation now, Matt.
Will you pray with me? Father, we come to you so blessed to live in a free country, to be able to express ourselves openly, and to have the opportunity to pursue our dreams. Help us to be ever mindful of all the ways we can help others through Rotary. In the words of Bob Dylan, let us not have the inclination to look back on any mistake, but rather let us look forward and join together to make a difference in our community and our world. In your holy name we pray. Amen.
Good afternoon. Let us sing America the Beautiful. Oh, beautiful for spacious skies, for amber waves of grain, for purple mountain majesties above the fruited plain. America, America, God shed his grace on thee, and crown thy good with brotherhood from sea to shining sea. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Good afternoon. It's my pleasure to introduce to you our visitors for today. We have several. First, we'll start with Julie Miner. Julie's with INCOG. She's a guest of Mary Staton. Thank you, Julie. Tom Hemphill with the Tulsa Global Alliance is here with past President Karen Keith. If you'll please stand, please stand and be recognized with your host. Sarah Fry with the Gatesway Foundation is here with Kathy Gorell. Welcome. Ivan Alvarez with Tedford Insurance is here with Tom Payne. Welcome, Ivan. Roxanne Gebhardt is here with John Howland. Thank you. And Walker Hansen is here with John O'Connor. Walker, you have to stand up. And then we have a prospective member with us today, Ken Chapman. Ken, welcome, and we hope we can seal the deal on getting your membership done pretty quickly. So if you'll give all of our visitors a round of applause, please. Thanks again for visiting today, and join us anytime. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Michael. I had somebody ask me one time, why do I cozy up to the speaker during the song and the pledge? And the reason is I'm trying to get as far from the mic as possible because I don't want to be singing on the video that you guys might watch. Now for a little sneak peek on our upcoming programs. On September the 21st, we have Roger Erker here from American Diabetes Association's Concours for the Cure event. I'm very interested in this program because I think it's a wonderful testament to what can be done in a community like Tulsa. as far as getting minds together to solve a problem. And I'm horribly excited about the cars they're going to bring. So I think it should be a great program. Roger out here is a real hoot, so we're excited to hear from him. On September 27th and 28th, that's 2 days, we have a speaker or a dignitary in. Don DeDoss, our district governor, is going to be in. And what I want to let most of you know is we have what we call a club assembly on the 27th, the evening before the 28th meeting. And that's a time when, of course, the board and the committee chairs will all be there to present their works to the district governor to kind of give him an assessment of what all we do in the club. But as a member of the club, if you're not there presenting, it's a great time to come, have fellowship, and listen about all the things that our club does. We're not really good about doing that, so this is one of the events that you can come to and share a glass of wine or a beer or a soda with a buddy and listen to Don and the rest of the people. It should be a great time. That's also going to be in a unique facility in downtown Tulsa called the 810 Building Community Room, so it's a neutral, nice little facility, so it should be a good time. Then, of course, on the 28th, Don will be our speaker at the club meeting. And then for the next 2 weeks, and I want you to hear that, for the next 2 weeks, we will be off-site for our meetings. So I don't want anybody to not attend the off-site meetings and forget they belong to Rotary 3 weeks later. So I really need you guys to pay attention and sign up and participate in these next 2 weeks off-site meetings. On October the 5th, we're going to go to the Air National Guard for an off-site meeting, and it should prove to be horribly entertaining. Brent Wright will be there. We have special Rotarians involved in that program. And if there's a 5 to 15 mile an hour north wind, we're going to see something that you will never get to see again this close, which is a vertical takeoff with a new jet. But you do have to sign up in the lobby. I know I've said this, but if this is your first meeting to hear this, you do have to sign up either through DACDB or here today or here next week. Next week's the deadline to sign up for this because you must present your driver's license number. Ed, I'm sorry you can't participate. I know yours was taken away, but yes, sir. Yes, register them, driver's license number the same way. Thank you for that question. And on October the 12th, we have our business visitation day. Sign-ups are on the table for that, so be sure and sign up today because, again, because we have 2 off-sites, you've got today and next Wednesday to sign up for that. Because of all these off-site meetings this next month, I really need you guys to keep an eye on your email. We're going to have a lot going on in October. It's kind of exciting, but it's just kind of a perfect storm with 2 off-site meetings. For example, in October, not only do we have the 2 great off-site meetings, but we have 2 great social events. We have Oktoberfest and a Thunder game, and we have the district conference in Branson. So October is loaded with off-sites, social events, and then our district conference, so watch out for emails asking you to sign up. Our sponsors today, Michael Hairston from Trust Company of Oklahoma, and Terry Carell with the Tulsa Zoo. Let's give our appreciation to our sponsors. We have one committee meeting today, and I encourage everybody in the room to go to it, and it's the IBA committee. So if you've never been involved in IBA awards, now's a chance to come be a fly on the wall, or even more importantly, to become involved. That is in room 233 right after Rotary. I have several announcements today, and please bear with me. It's been a really tough couple of weeks for the Rotary family. And it started with losing Ron Butler and then saying goodbye to him last week. And now we've lost 3 more of our friends. This past week, we lost former member Dan Rogers, a long-term member of this club. We lost past President Hal Calhoun last Friday. And most recently, last Friday afternoon, we lost Jerry Cornelius. Ron, Jerry, and Hal were all 3 recipients of our Service Above Self and Then Some award. You don't lose 3 of those and not feel it, not only from the relational standpoint, but also from what they did for our clubs. All 4 of these gentlemen were long-standing members of our club and great contributors. A memorial service was conducted last Wednesday for Dan. Hal's services are to be held here at First United Methodist tomorrow morning at 11 a.m. If you're a past president, please let the office know that you're going to attend. They want all the past presidents to sit together. And Jerry's services are at 3 p.m. today at Southminster Presbyterian. There's cards on your table, so please share your thoughts, condolences, prayers, and hopes with that family as they move forward. On October the 28th, at our normal Wednesday meeting, Terry Heritage and her crew will be here to stick a needle in your arm if you're so inclined to get that done. They say it will guarantee you don't catch the flu. They've also requested that you wear a short sleeve shirt so we don't have any stripping in the foyer, and bring your insurance card. On October the 5th, as I mentioned, we have a unique opportunity to go to the Air National Guard. Please sign up by September 21st. There's a table outside on your way out. They will assist you and get that done in a matter of minutes, or look out for the email. Tomorrow night, we have the Diversity Inclusion Committee is co-sponsoring a really interesting forum with the Tulsa Historical Society. So to tell us more about that event is Michelle Place.
Well, I've brought some guests with me today. If you saw this morning's Tulsa World paper, we had an article about the forum that we're going to do tomorrow night at the Tulsa Historical Society. It is a partnership between our Diversity and Inclusion Committee here at Rotary and the Tulsa City County Library's African American Resource Center. I've brought guests. If you all will stand, this is Alicia Latimer from the library. Alicia Clement, she's also Alicia Latimer Clement, if you don't think we were confused. But anyway, she is a retired social worker and very active within the North Tulsa community. And our special guest is Shante Abagaz, who is originally from Tulsa. She lived here until she was 6, and she lives in Chicago. But she is the international coordinator for this conference in Switzerland. And we kept asking, why are you inviting us to come to Switzerland to talk about Tulsa's race relations? And so she keeps, we're in dialogue about that. And sometimes I understand it, and sometimes I don't get it. But what I can assure you is there is global interest in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and our race relations. And we have a chance to be a beacon to the world, to talk to other countries, to be an example, to show either hope or despair on race relations and what can happen when you have a horrific event in your history. And so we're going to be talking about that. Former Mayor Susan Savage will also be with us. And we hope that you will come, that you will tell your friends tomorrow night, 6:30, Tulsa Historical Society Museum. And another collaboration is with the Altamont Bakery out of B'nai Amuna, or it's going to be selling cookies for $2 and a bottle of water for $1. So bring your ones.
All
and
right.
Another partnership with Tulsa. Thank you.
Very good, Michelle. And thank you for becoming involved in our club so quickly. I think you're part of Class 1. Thank you for your involvement. And welcome, guests. We appreciate you coming, and more importantly, representing Tulsa in Switzerland. Oh my, how do you get to do that? Now I'd like to take a few minutes to talk about membership and our goals this year. I did not announce this at first because I didn't want anybody to think I was crazy, but privately, and much to the office's dismay, I established a goal of 100 new members for this year. This is 100th anniversary of the Rotary Foundation, so for me, this is 100 for 100. You're going to hear 100 for 100 several times. 100 is not out of the question at all. So there's a little thermometer on the screen, and basically what it's showing you is we are doing well. We're on our way to 100 members. We have 7 confirmed, 6 in the pipe, and 4 more applied, or 3 applied. I want us to be able to talk openly in this setting about membership. It is very important to the community. It's very important to this club. It's important for our relationships. I value my membership as a significant loss if I wasn't here. When I look at friends around me, I think I am denying them the opportunity to have what we're all blessed with if I don't invite them. I'd like for us to turn the page and think about it that way. So you'll be getting an email soon from the membership committee that will help you in that engagement of trying to get the people out of your pocket or on the card, those 5 that you wanted to get forever, and maybe they can help you a little bit get over the hump with that. So look out for that email. At this time, I'd like to introduce our Rotarian of the Day, Andy Avila. I am so excited to come to Rotary every day to see Andy. I mean, he's got a smile on his face, and he's ready to shake your hand and be your friend. And Andy comes to us from assurance. He's an assurance manager at PricewaterhouseCoopers. He's probably the first accountant I've ever really kind of liked. I mean, they're one notch above, attorneys, but I've only dealt with auditors, and you're not an auditor, correct? Okay, that's the difference. He joined our club in February of 2016 and is part of our class 2. Andy is on the membership committee as a co-chair of a subcommittee for young professionals. So he's out trying to grow our club with young men and women just like himself. A little fun fact about Andy is that he and his wife like to travel, but they have extremely different tastes. Andy likes to go to places that are cold, like Alaska, and Begonia, his wife, loves to go to places that are warm, like a beach or Costa Rica. So they trade off each year picking where they're going to go. Now, Andy, I think I can simplify this for you. I've got 5 kids, so I can speak from experience that I can cut down your travel expenses. Join me for a spring baseball game at One Oak Field that starts around 6 p.m., and it'll be a crisp 85 or so. And by the time the game ends, it will have dropped to about 35 when the sun goes down. So you both can both experience your particular tastes and have a great time in Tulsa, Oklahoma. So help me introduce and please welcome our Rotarian of the Day, Andy Avila.
I'm thrilled to be here today with you, and I was having a conversation with my wife the other day about which was my favorite day of the week. Of course, it's Friday. By Wednesday, it's becoming a very big day. And 2 reasons for Wednesday being a big day. One reason is I have the opportunity to have lunch with you, and the other reason is have good speaker like Dr. Sean Latham, who actually is going to have a lot of things to do to explain today. Our speaker topic today is titled, I Kinda Live Where I Find Myself, the Bob Dylan Archive. To quote our speaker, Dr. Sean Latham, in a 1994 interview with Rolling Stones, Dylan famously claims a kind of permanent homelessness, telling readers that I kinda live where I find myself. With the arrival of the Bob Dylan Archive here in Tulsa, we have arrived to a new intersection of imaginative highways of American culture. Here, in a city that has lately rededicated itself to the arts. Dylan might be considered the most influential singer-songwriter of the 20th century, an artist with an astonishing ability to graft the new onto the old. In his songs, traditional Scottish ballads mixed with the star rings of the Delta blues. Romantic poetry finds a new voice in the snare of the electric guitar, and the mystery of time, death, and fate riddle their way into a revitalized rock and roll. Dylan's words, his music, his notebooks, and much will find a new place here in Tulsa. We are very honored to have Dr. Sean Latham, the Walter and Dove Chair of English and Director of the Oklahoma Center for the Humanities at the University of Tulsa, here to share his insight with us. Sean is the author of 10 books on modern culture and literature, including Am I a Snob? The Art of Scandal and Modernist, Evolution of an Idea. Dr. Latham will briefly look at some of the key documents and explain what they tell us about Bob Dylan, and also will tell us how Dylan drew onto the past to reinvent not only popular culture music, but the very idea of America itself. Please join me in making him welcome.
Thank you very much. Thank you for that very kind introduction. It's a real pleasure to be here. I can say this is the first time I've ever spoken to a Rotary Club, and I can't imagine, it's very strange to think that Bob Dylan is actually going to be the subject of such a talk. You know, I looked around to see had Dylan, in fact, ever himself maybe spoken or performed for a Rotary Club. The answer is no, and for good reasons, of course. Though he did, sort of infamously, in 1963, when he was still a very young man, receive a Civil Rights Award at a dinner. This is just in the wake of Kennedy's assassination. Over the course of this dinner, he sat at a table very much like this one and got completely wasted on the wine, got up, gave a rambling speech in which he denounced everyone in the crowd, himself, said he kind of identified with Oswald, and then left. So it's probably good that he never really took up any more of those speaking engagements. Now, the title of my talk today, here we go, comes from an interview that Dylan did with Rolling Stone in 1984. Now, if you know anything at all about Dylan, you know that he's a strange, strange man of many parts. In fact, for most people, the Dylan they know is the one they first encountered in their teens. So for some, he's a folk singer. For others, a rock star. For some, an unlikely country star. And for others still, like me, a sort of has-been launching what we now call Christian rock. And for those under 30, a classic figure from another era trading on an eerily ruined voice. These pieces don't just fit together, and that seems to be the way Dylan wants it. From the moment he first hitched his way out of small-town Minnesota and into a bitterly cold Greenwich Village, he's been permanently and paradoxically unsettled. After cutting his first album, he famously told wildly untrue stories about his past, baffling interviewers and PR people. He said that he had grown up in a carnival, for example. He said that he had run away from home dozens of times as a child and that he'd been taught the guitar on the street by a sort of blind musician. None of that was true. He grew up comfortably middle class in a town called Hibbing, Minnesota. He spent some time at the University of Minnesota and lucked his way into a recording contract at Columbia. The minute he got caught spinning one story famously throughout his life, he started presenting another one equally untrue, a process that reached a hilarious climax in his memoir, large portions of which, once we got it and read it, we realized were lifted from Twain, Melville, and many others. So he seems, in short, deeply and even existentially homeless. And the same is absolutely true of his music. Indeed, part of Dylan's genius resides precisely in the fact that in what he derives from being ill at ease. In the early 60s, Dylan, of course, helped launch the folk boom and became its most successful songwriter. He became the iconic troubadour, the guy who would stand at the microphone only with the guitar and sing straight from the heart. And just as he reached the height of his career, I should say, and that's how he modeled himself, that's him posing as Woody Guthrie at just this time. And just as he became the world's most famous folk singer, he picked up a Fender Stratocaster, that's him on the left there, at the 1965 Newport Folk Festival, and started playing electric rock and roll. Audiences booed him at that folk festival. That's Pete Seeger up there being exasperated, who famously was looking around that night for an axe to try to cut the electrical cords running to the stage. And Seeger's dad was supposedly in the car with the windows rolled up weeping that Dylan had done this. So having shed his jeans and fisherman's cap for Ray-Bans and boots, Dylan became the icon of cool. And yet, just as he became the world's greatest rock and roll star, he got married, he moved to a farm in upstate New York, had a bunch of kids, and famously made himself completely absent during 1968. He then began publishing country albums right at the height of rock in the 60s, became a lifelong friend of Johnny Cash, started recording in Nashville, and invented what we call roots music. When that got cool, he left it, made a very public conversion to Christianity, started preaching from the stage, wrote what many consider his worst songs, which are all these kind of finger-pointing songs about why you should convert. And now an aged star, he's recently, I don't know if you've followed his career at all, but he started putting out strange albums that were inspired by music from Frank Sinatra and Dean Martin, and doing this just at the moment that he can no longer sing, right? He can barely croak. So not what we think of when we think of crooner music. So this homeless ranging in his music is mirrored in his life. He owns property all over the world, but has been famously seen wandering around in disguise and was once picked up by the cops who thought he was a vagrant. He's constantly on the road as part of what's called the Never Ending Tour. And in the last few months alone, he's played in the US, in Asia, and in Europe, often in very small venues, and he does this despite the fact that he can no longer even play the guitar owing to a hand injury. And to attend a Dylan concert is a weird experience because he reinvents the songs right there on stage. Sometimes he even turns his back on his band so they can't tell what he's doing, so they're rushing to catch up or just baffled and stop playing for a while. And it may even take you a while to realize that this song you're hearing is actually one of his most famous hits. So this restlessness, this refusal to settle down, to make himself at home is integral to Dylan's genius. And it's what makes him more than just a rock star or a songwriter. From the time he stepped out of the car into that snowy New York dawn, he has attempted to make American popular music soaring yet serious, catchy yet meditative, beautiful yet entirely unsettling. And with the arrival of the Bob Dylan Archive here in Tulsa, we will finally have the chance to see how this happened, to look for a moment into this mobile laboratory of American genius. So I've tried to sketch out here very briefly a sense of Dylan's range and influence, but you might still reasonably ask, does he really matter? Will anybody really care once his fans are, as some would say, finally dead? You know, and why do we need an archive anyway? What's so interesting about a sort of has-been rock and rollers' papers and guitars? So I want to try to answer this question by looking just briefly at what one thing the archive can tell us. And I want to do it by listening and talking about one of his most famous and most powerful songs about homelessness, Like a Rolling Stone. Thanks to the archive, we know that Dylan worked for long and hard on this song and did so for the very first time that he was just starting to use a band behind him. Now, he famously never rehearsed with his session players in advance. Instead, he would show up at the studio with a wild collection of papers, typically late at night with a bunch of red wine in tow. He would hand out chord sheets and brief instructions, then start recording right away, often trying to get what he wanted on the first or second take. And if he didn't like it, he just moved on to another song. And he would bring dozens and dozens of songs with him to record till he had enough for an album, and then he left. Now, this is completely different than what most musicians are accustomed to, and certainly different than, say, the Beatles or the Beach Boys, who really are famous in part for the work that they did in the studio, building their sounds, layering them together to make a song. So in the time that remains, I want to show you briefly, using just a little bit of knowledge from the archive, how Dylan actually worked. And I want to do that by first just playing a few verses from Like a Rolling Stone. It's actually a very long song. It's 6.5 minutes. Too long for me to play in its entirety today. And this is one of the things that made it really weird when Dylan released it. That was 2 minutes too long for the radio, and yet it still made it to number 2 on the Billboard charts. So as we listen to this, I just want to ask you, pay attention to the first verse. I'll project the lyrics here. And listen in particular to the sound of the organ, which I'll point out when it comes in. It's going to be quite important here in just a minute. So the song goes on for another 2 verses here, another 2 choruses. And the pattern basically follows, though it changes a little bit, and I'll talk about that in just a moment. But I want to just start by saying, that when we first think about or listen to or hear this song, it's pretty easy to see and to hear in this a searing indictment of a woman that he calls Miss Lonely. And he appears to be sneering in particular at her phoniness, her artificiality. She seems to be someone who's quite rich and who's sort of come into the New York bohemian life or the hipster life here and failed. Over the course of the song, she gradually sort of falls down until it seems that she's poor and destitute and sort of fundamentally lost, which is what brings us back to this recurring chorus. The woman itself, many believe, was based on Edie Sedgwick, a famous New York debutante and socialite who ran in the circles with Dylan and Andy Warhol and others in New York. This is a pretty angry song. It's not a very nice song, ultimately, when we first look at it. And I want to talk a little bit about how Dylan makes it sound so nasty here first. So this is my English professor bit. The song is carefully constructed. We have all these very strong end-line rhymes here. Let me go back to this one. Often it begins here, ending on you and you. And then about and out and loud. I'm actually missing a line down there, but it's all right. And so this creates already a kind of sense of pattern in the song. So Dylan is coming back, rhymes make it sound kind of like there's a bit of finger pointing going on. But this is heightened by the fact that Dylan uses what we call internal rhymes. So each line also has multiple words within it that are rhymed. So once upon a time, you dressed so fine, you threw the bums a dime in your prime. Right, and this makes the language feel even more tight and constricted. And he's doing a particular kind of rhyming here. He's using fricatives, which are the consonant sounds that we make that force us to blow air over our teeth or tongue, and it makes it sound like we're spitting, right? So I'm going to exaggerate this just slightly without spitting, I promise. Once upon a time, you dressed so fine, you blew the bums a dime in your prime, right? I mean, if you say those words to yourself, you'll hear the way that you're kind of spitting, and that they heighten that sense of a pattern within the language. It's almost as if Dylan is pointing his finger at us and telling us, this woman, why she's so wrong, right? This is how this poetry basically works. And we also might ask, this you also seems to be not only Miss Lonely, but even us. That is, we might be indicted by this song for the same kind of phoniness that he finds in Miss Lonely. So Dylan's kind of yelling at us here, too. So all this combines, ultimately, to make the language angry, aggressive, smart, compact, and supremely confident. It is what we would call the language of the hipster. It's the language of cool. It's the language of snobbery, right? This is a singer that's better than us, better than Miss Lonely, and telling her why she's on the outside looking in. So that's a pretty brutal way to think about this song, which begs the question, right? Why is this arguably the most famous rock song in history? Rolling Stone rated it as the #1 rock song of all time. Why does Dylan keep playing it? He's played it over 1,000 times in concert. Why do people keep caring about it? Like any pop song that you hear today, especially any beef between stars or hip-hop artists, this kind of finger-pointing is commonplace, and it's also really dull, right? Who's going to remember the Kardashians 5 years from now? So, right? Why should we care about Edie Sedgwick in this song? But now I want to go briefly through the archive to see if we can learn something more about what's going on here. So the lyrics from this song, we know, emerged from a 20-page piece of spontaneous writing in a notebook that Dylan once called Vomit. And Dylan, I should say, Dylan couldn't stop writing. I think he still can't. He just can't. We know from the archive that any piece of paper he could lay his hands on, he started writing lyrics on, or notes, or ideas. Advertisements, phone books, Bibles from hotels, anything that was there, he would just write on. And we've got all this stuff stacked up now at the Gilcrease. So we can trace the origins of the words from this song into this document and discover not Dylan, the Woody Guthrie impersonator who grew up as a carny and ran away from home, but Dylan, the reader and thinker, since these words appear amid meditations guided by works from Friedrich Nietzsche, Karl Marx, and a whole slew of French poets and surrealist writers. These were people writing and thinking about personal and individual freedom, about its costs as well as its pleasures. They worried about what the world might mean if humans are indeed free of things like divine will or fate. This is what Nietzsche meant when he wrote God is Dead, and he was terrified yet fascinated by the idea of living a life of absolute moral freedom in which we are apparently responsible only to ourselves. In his notebooks, Dylan too, and remember, Dylan later converted to Christianity. He confronted this fear and then found his own solution to it. And we see him here grappling with this same mixture of fear and ecstasy. Now, Dylan was a musician as well as a writer, and we can learn something more by digging into his sound recordings. The Dylan archives, it turns out, hold 20 different studio takes for Like a Rolling Stone. 20. As I said, this is a guy who maybe would record twice and then move on. And there are fascinating things here. He attempted to play it as a waltz at one point, for example, which sounds really strange. And he varied the tempo, the instruments, everything else you can imagine. The recorded version, furthermore, was only the 4th take, so he kept doing this again and again. Even though we've got the one that he kept going. He wasn't happy with it. And now here's the strange and important thing. This is a great story. The guy on the right there is named Al Cooper. He was a very young musician at the time, a guitarist, and he showed up at the studio to see if he could get on as a session gig with Dylan. And then he heard the guy on the left there, Mike Bloomfield, play, one of the greatest guitarists of all time. And Cooper quickly realized he was outclassed and would never be allowed to play in this session. But then he snuck back into the recording booth and sat down at the electric organ, what's called a Hammond organ, and I've given you a picture of it here, when the producer turned his back. The producer turned back around and said, what are you doing there? Get out. Dylan said, no, let him stay, let him play this thing. Cooper says he's never played this organ before, so this is even stranger. And so he starts playing this and lays down a track. Dylan listens to the track, not only hears that organ, but then asks that it be turned up within the song. That's why you can hear it so clearly. It's louder than all the other instruments in the song. It's not even given that prominence by this increased volume, but by the fact that it does seem Cooper maybe didn't know what he was doing. He's playing an 8th note behind the rest of the band, like he's waiting for them to see what the notes are so he can then play them next, right? So he hears a chord change and he makes the chord change, okay? And it creates a really eerie sense to this song, the sense that there's another voice, another instrument, something else playing here. And here we see Dylan the improvisationist at work, hearing something he liked and then integrating it into a piece he had been working on intently and maybe thought was going in a different direction. So this mixture of archival material about the lyrics and the music, I want to suggest, helps us better understand why Rolling Stone is more than just a finger-pointing song. And to make that argument, I want to close by looking at the chorus. It's easy to hear this at the start as an angry taunt, an echo of the verse that savages Miss Lonely for her attempt to shed a life of privilege and wealth and a failed attempt to become cool. As the song progresses and the sound of that organ rises, however, it changes. I think the meanings of these words changes. The words themselves don't change, their meaning changes. The chorus becomes less an indifferent question or an indictment than a question. That is, it becomes less an indictment than a question. And one, I would argue, Dylan poses with increasing wonder. That is, the singer, and perhaps the audience, as we sing along, increasingly realize that Miss Lonely may well be experiencing something special, something authentic, something even transcendent, something crucially the singer can't quite grasp. Right? He doesn't say what this experience is like, he can only ask about it. And as the guitar and the other instruments come together to constitute something like a mob chanting at Miss Lonely, and I've showed you even how Dylan's language is tightly woven, the guitars here too are tightly woven together. The organ stands apart. I would even argue that it's something like Miss Lonely's voice, yelling back at the song, talking back to the song, operating somehow above the song, soaring above the rest of this well-ordered music. And it points to the challenges and the terrors of this idea of absolute freedom, of living a life beyond wealth, beyond societal norms, beyond being cool, and a life that even Dylan himself can no longer imagine. Dylan, who can't be free anymore. He's a star, right? He's caught up in a world that he finds increasingly phony and artificial. So in short, I would say this song, the way that this chorus changes meaning is because Dylan stops using it as a taunt and starts wondering, how does it feel? How does it truly feel to be on your own? When Bruce Springsteen inducted Dylan into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 1988, he described this song's famous, quote, snare shot that sounded like somebody kicked open the door to your mind. He captures here, that is, Springsteen captures here, I think, the genius of this song. The fact that it arises from the tensions and the contradictions between freedom and constraint, between the individual and society, between our inner and our outer worlds. This process in which Dylan's vision is pitted against that of other poets and his sound is pitted against that of other musicians is what makes this song great. It's what makes it a work of genius, and it positions him precisely in a long canon of American writers like Melville, Faulkner, and others who asked these very same questions. And these questions matter not because, and the song matters not because it offers an answer, but because it is posed here in a fundamentally new way, a startling way, at the start of what would become the rock revolution. Thanks to the arrival of the Bob Dylan Archive here in Tulsa, we can see this process happen. We can look at how Dylan took what was initially a kind of nasty song, probably about a failed love affair. Dylan wrote about these things all the time, and made it into what has become not only one of the most important pieces of rock music in the 20th century, but one of the most important pieces of poetry in the 20th century. Thanks. Any questions? I'd be happy to take some questions, though I'm told I have to repeat them. Yeah? So the question is, how did Tulsa end up with the archive? The simplest, most direct answer is the generosity of the George Kaiser Family Foundation, who has acquired the archive in partnership with the University of Tulsa. So the foundation spent the large share of the money in order to acquire it and bring it here, and it's now going to be housed at the Gilcrease Museum, the Helmrich Center for American Research out there, where university will make it available to the public for use and research. When it will be exactly open, I don't know. I actually thought I would have some images to show today, but it's not officially open, so I'm not allowed to show any of those images yet. But we're hoping sometime in January or February. My bet would be more like March or April. There's a lot, and I should say, there's a lot of stuff. There are truckloads and truckloads of this stuff. Dylan kept everything. We didn't know, but he did. He kept absolutely everything. Every scrap of paper that he wrote on, it's all there. So just the process of looking at it, cataloging it, understanding it is going to take decades.
I have heard that he was impressed with the fact that Woody Guthrie's stuff was here, and I'm just wondering if that was a rumor or did that have something to do with him putting his stuff here?
So the question was, did the Woody Guthrie Center have anything to do with the archive coming here? The answer is I don't know. That seems the most reasonable expectation to me. I think my understanding, and this is by no means direct, I had no role in the Kaiser Foundation or their decisions, was that Dylan was in fact impressed by the Woody Guthrie Center, though he's never visited. He still hasn't been to Tulsa to visit this. He's a very strange guy. I mean, let's just be honest. He's just a weird dude. And you can't trust a word that he says. I mean, in fact, it's better to not believe it. Such are the hazards of being famous when you turn 17, I mean, he just doesn't trust interviewers. He doesn't trust anybody. And so, part of the weirdness is after we made this announcement that the papers were in fact moving here, he then released his tour dates, and Tulsa wasn't on the list. I think Kansas City was the closest he was coming. He'd picked out every city around Tulsa and was not going to come here. He now has added Tulsa belatedly to that tour list, but whether or not he'll come here, whether or not he'll even visit the HCAR, anybody's guess. I wouldn't trust him if he said he would be here, so. Yeah.
You said there's truckloads and truckloads of things. What's one thing maybe you talked about that you found that surprised you?
So the question is, what's surprising in there? Well, I think the first and most important thing is the volume of this material. That you can. So we've known for a while that the sound archives were there because Dylan, who's a very clever businessman, or at least has very clever business people working for him, has been steadily releasing his sound archive on CDs. So, this version of Like a Rolling Stone, for example, he's now released all 20 versions that you can buy on a special CD that costs like $100. So cleverly done, but also gives us a sense of those sound archives. What we didn't know is whether or not he kept any of these musical sheets, these notes that he would bring into the studio, his notebooks, stuff about his own writing and work. And I would say that's not one thing, but it's the sheer volume of the material that's there. There are some special things, to be sure. There are a couple of notebooks where he did some of his very earliest writing, where we didn't really know. It's a great speculation because Dylan, if you've heard him at all in early interviews, he's from Minnesota, and he had at least a partial university education. His parents are Jewish, very comfortably middle class. They were appliance dealers in Minnesota, and Dylan talks like Woody Guthrie. So he talks like like a parody of an Okie hick, right? I mean, he affects this slang that he doesn't actually have. He affects this mode of talking, and it's just completely unauthentic. And it's totally styled on him having heard Woody Guthrie talk. So the question, and so he's always styled himself as this kind of guy that's not educated. He's out there on the edge, you know. He doesn't really know what's going on. And so the surprising thing, I think, is when we look in these notebooks and we're like, oh, he was reading Nietzsche. He's been taking notes on Nietzsche. He's been reading surrealist French poetry from the 19th century. Okay, you know, that tells me that this is a very different Dylan than the guy who's wearing the fisherman's cap and a cigarette and pretends to be barely literate and grew up in a carnival, right? This is a guy that's actually deeply involved in American intellectual life in the 50s and 60s and is reading deeply before he writes this music. It's one of the things that probably makes the music endure, is that as we look at below the surface of the songs, we realize it's the tip of a giant iceberg, right? Like as would be the case with any good poet or songwriter. Yes?
Was it surprising when you received the award that he went to the White House, and did anything crazy happen there?
Oh, you mean when Obama gave him the Presidential Medal of Freedom? No, he's a pretty elderly guy now. You know, he didn't talk, which he famously doesn't do. He's received every Lifetime Musical Achievement Award you can imagine. So I don't think he misbehaved at the White House, but he's misbehaved on the Grammys and Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. One of his more recent ones was a very short, very strange thank you, where he said something about basically only your mother could forgive you, and he kind of walked off the stage, plainly drunk. So, I mean, Dylan, the public persona, he's, as I say, I mean, I can't emphasize enough what a weird guy he is. But, you know, so is James Joyce, so is William Faulkner. I mean, William Faulkner, you know, famously, so great American 20th century novelist, right, said he'd gone to World War I and had been a pilot and got shot down, right? Faulkner did not actually fly a plane in World War I. He was never hurt, but he limped his entire life in order to keep up this lie. So, again, I think Dylan is in that same sort of Twain-like company of great artificers who understand the difference between public and private personas. Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah, I hope they don't say that about the recent president of the Rotary Club one day, but it's probably coming. We have a book that we give in lieu of a speaker's gift, and we give it to City Clinton Elementary, which is on North Peoria. What? Oh, yeah. Blowing in the Wind, lyrics by Bob Dylan, maybe. Yeah. Illustration by John Muth, but maybe Dylan. Okay. Thank you very much for inscribing that, and we'll be sure and get that to the school. Also on the screens, you'll see our volunteers for today. We could not do all of this presentation without them. And if David Momper will make his way up while you're thanking those sponsors. And volunteers. David, what you got?
Business visitation, going great. Love you guys. It's time to sign up. Forms are on the table to pick your place that you would like to visit. We would prefer, staff would prefer, if you went on DAC and put it in there so that they don't have to put it in there. But at least write it down, pick your place. It's time to get this wrapped up. Thank you very much.
Thank you, David. This is a form you've got today and next week to fill this out. If you're a person sponsoring a BizViz, would you please stand up for me? Quickly, thank you, thank you. Okay. If you see somebody you're interested in meeting, go check them out after the meeting today and get on the list for their BizViz. Sometimes we don't put names to faces very well. So thank you for standing for that. Well, before we do our 50-50 drawing, which is Barney's cue to get up here, I'd like to remind, Barney is here, right? Okay, I'd like to remind everyone that the funds raised through this drawing will go to our Rotary International Fund, the General Fund. And to learn more about some of the works of RI's General Fund, let's take a look at the following video.
Lo que queríamos era formar un grupo de personas con discapacidad que pudiera ir trabajando cosas y ir rompiendo estos esquemas que había en torno a las personas con discapacidad, sobre todo en México.
Nos veían personas trabajando en el taller, entonces empezaban a preguntar si podíamos arreglar sillas y ruedas. Poder hacer algo en nuestra comunidad, con nuestra comunidad, para nuestra comunidad. Y Rotary es la mejor forma. Vas a encontrar una estructura que permite el acercamiento de conocimiento, herramientas y financiamiento también. Ya podemos ofrecer el trabajo a muy bajo costo a los usuarios y por lo tanto la cantidad de trabajo, la cantidad de reparaciones ha aumentado 500%. Todos los participantes en el proyecto ya tienen un ingreso decente. Pero hay beneficios que son más sutiles y eso hablo del impacto que tiene el proyecto en la cultura, en la sociedad, en la manera de mirar de la gente.
No es un megaproyecto, no es la construcción de un puente, no es una empresa mundialmente conocida, es esta pequeña piedra que está ahí para construir más cosas. Gracias, Rotary.
If you'll please look at your tickets. Don't be surprised if this is Dana Burks, because she's holding a third of the tickets today. 247-984. Give her a moment to go through all of those. 247-984. That's okay to buy the pot. Come on. Come on up.
Come on up, Dana, draw a card.
Come here. Yeah. This is how it works.
So that's how you get to draw a card. You buy 70 tickets. I thanked her in advance for her donation to the pot.
Yes. Not that one. Oh, no, I'm seeing. You want
to guess what it is?
No, I don't. All right. Thank you.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you. We had another record day, not only thanks to Dana, but everybody else in the group. And I appreciate you asking me early in the summer to do this. He said he was looking for somebody honest and integrity that everybody would trust, but all of those guys were busy, so he wound up with me. So, thank you.
Hey, what's the pot, by the way, to keep you honest?
$1,061. So if you donate your winnings to Rotary International, you'll become a Paul Harris Fellow again in one day. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much. Well, I know how much you all enjoy the ticket auctions. We do not have one today. I'm sorry for that. Last week, we auctioned OU and OSU tickets. I have the OU tickets in my pocket. I asked David if we could re-auction the OSU tickets. I was willing to re-auction the OU tickets, and he said he was going to keep his, so I'll keep mine. You know, OU's playing a Big Ten school, Ohio State, the other OSU, the lesser of the two. And that's very exciting. We really, Oklahoma lost a game, so they kind of need to win this one. You know, and OSU lost to a very good Big Ten opponent, Michigan, last week, and, you know, I know they'll bounce back from that. Oh, it wasn't Michigan? Central Michigan, did you say? Central Michigan? Oh, Central Michigan, well, never mind. I encourage you to tell your friends and coworkers about Rotary and the work that we do in this community. Tell them about how much fun we have. before you stand up, keep the camera rolling. Let's all, when we stand up to adjourn, wave and say hi to our missing Sarge, Catherine DeCamp. Wave at Catherine, and we are adjourned.